The recording device hummed softly in the silence of the chamber. Relin Voss sat behind a table made of cold metal, his four arms resting flat against the surface. His scales had lost their shine months ago. The once proud commander of the Valeth 7th Fleet now looked like a creature pulled from wreckage. 12 representatives from 12 species sat before him. They had come to Hollow Point Station seeking answers. Their governments were considering war against the human race, and they wanted intelligence from someone who had survived it. Relin was the only one left who could tell them. "You want to know about humans," he said. His voice was rough, damaged from screaming that had happened long ago. "You want to know if you can defeat them. You want me to give you their weaknesses." He let out a sound that might have been a laugh in better times. "I will tell you everything, and when I am finished, you will understand why I am the last of my kind sitting here today." Relin closed his eyes and let the memories come flooding back. The Valeth Dominion had ruled 47 star systems. They had conquered 12 intelligent species over 3,000 years. Their warships were the finest in the known galaxy, their soldiers bred for combat, their commanders trained from birth in the art of war. When scouts discovered humanity, the High Council barely spent an hour discussing the matter. Category 3, the classification report read: intelligent but primitive. No unified government. Fleet capacity estimated at 300 vessels of inferior design. Recommended action: standard conquest protocol. Projected timeline: 3 weeks. Relin remembered sitting in the command chamber when the order came through. 400 warships would deploy to the Sol system. He would lead the 7th Fleet, 120 vessels strong, as the primary assault force. It was considered an honor, an easy honor. "I want you to understand something," Relin said to the representatives. "We did not go to war with humans out of hatred. We went because we saw them as simple, primitive. They fought among themselves constantly. They had nuclear weapons pointed at their own cities. Their space technology was laughable by our standards." He paused. "We thought we were putting animals in cages. We were so certain of this that our soldiers brought recording devices to capture the conquest for entertainment broadcasts back home." The Valeth Armada launched on what their calendar called the Day of Triumph. Relin stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the stars streak past. Around him, his officers discussed how they would divide the human territory for resource extraction. Nobody discussed combat tactique. Why would they? The humans were Category 3. Intelligence reports mentioned that Earth was classified as a death world. The gravity was harsh. The climate was violent. The planet hosted millions of species that could kill, from bacteria to predators larger than Valeth soldiers. The High Council dismissed this information. "Surviving a difficult planet does not make them warriors," one council member had said. "It makes them desperate. Desperate creatures surrender quickly." Relin had believed this. He had believed it with his entire being. The fleet entered human space on schedule. Outer sensor stations detected their approach, and the humans responded exactly as predicted. Scattered resistance, uncoordinated defense, a handful of patrol vessels that turned and fled rather than engage. "It is already over," Relin's second officer said. "They know they cannot win." The first target was a mining colony in the asteroid belt. 2,000 humans, 12 defensive turrets, a single transport ship that tried to escape and was destroyed within seconds. The Valeth landing parties expected surrender. They found something else. The miners had no military training. They had no weapons designed for combat. They had drilling equipment, industrial cutters, and explosive charges meant for breaking rocks. They used all of it. The first wave of Valeth soldiers walked into the colony expecting to round up prisoners. 6 hours later, the colony was silent. The miners were dead, but they had taken 300 Valeth soldiers with them. Relin remembered reading the report with confusion. 300 losses against untrained workers? Impossible. There must have been a mistake. There was no mistake, he told the representatives. That was the first lesson humans taught us. They do not surrender. They do not run. When you corner them, they become something else entirely. But the High Council dismissed the losses as an anomaly. The campaign continued. A research station fell next. 40 scientists. No weapons at all. They fought with fire and chemistry in their bare hands for 6 hours before the Valith breached the final room. The last scientist alive triggered a reactor overload that killed 80 more soldiers. Rellen's communications officer intercepted a final transmission from that station. A human woman, her face bloody, her voice completely calm. "Tell your commander something," she said. "You came here thinking we were prey. You were wrong." The transmission ended. The station exploded. Rellen reported this to the High Council. He recommended reassessing the human threat level. He suggested that perhaps Category 3 was incorrect. The council told him to continue the assault. "I followed orders," Rellen said quietly. "I was a good soldier, a loyal commander. I believe my leaders knew better than I did." He looked at the 12 representatives. "That belief killed 7 million Valith. Remember that as I continue." The recording device kept humming. Rellen had barely begun. Rellen took a long drink of water. His throat hurt from talking, but the memories hurt more. The 12 representatives waited in silence. Some had begun taking notes. Others simply stared. "Where was I?" Rellen asked. "Ah, yes. The asteroid belt. Those first colonies. We told ourselves they were anomalies. Desperate creatures fighting without hope." He set down the water container. "We were fools. Those first battles were not anomalies. They were warnings. And we ignored every single one." The campaign pushed deeper into human space. Mars fell within 6 weeks, though the cost was staggering. The Red Planet had been home to 3 million human colonists living in domed cities and underground tunnels. The Valith expected them to flee to Earth when the assault began. They did not flee. Rellen had commanded the ground assault on a city called New Damascus. 40,000 civilians. A small defense force of maybe 2,000 actual soldiers. Standard conquest protocol suggested the city would fall in 8 hours. It took 11 days. The humans had turned every building into a fortress. Every tunnel became a death trap. They collapsed structures on advancing Valith columns. They flooded corridors with toxic gas. They set fires that burned for days because they knew Valith soldiers could not function well in high heat. "I lost 9,000 soldiers taking that single city," Rellen said. 9,000, against civilians with homemade weapons and military surplus from decades past. But what disturbed him most was not the casualties. It was the way the humans fought. They worked together. Civilians and soldiers, old and young, men and women. A human grandmother would spot for a human sniper. A human child would carry ammunition through tunnels too small for adults. They had no ranks, no formal chain of command in those desperate hours. They simply fought as one organism with one purpose. "You have to understand," Rellen told the representatives. "The Valith way of war is structured. Officers command. Soldiers obey. If an officer falls, soldiers wait for new orders. It is efficient. It is organized." He shook his head. "Humans do not work that way. Kill their leader, and another human simply takes over. Kill that one, and another rises. They do not wait for orders. They see what needs to be done, and they do it. Every human is a soldier. Every human is a commander. Every human is a threat." Mars eventually fell, but the Valith had lost 60,000 soldiers. The High Council was troubled, but not alarmed. 60,000 was painful, but the Dominion had millions more. The real shock came when Valith intelligence analyzed captured human equipment. "They were learning," Rellen said. "In 6 weeks, they had studied our weapons, our armor, our tactics. They were already building counters to everything we used. Human engineers had reverse-engineered Valith plasma rifles. Human scientists had developed armor that could resist Valith blade weapons. Human commanders had written tactical manuals on how to exploit Valith weaknesses. 6 weeks. That was all it took. I reported this to the High Council," Rellen continued. "I told them the humans were adapting faster than any species we had ever encountered. I recommended we reconsider the campaign." The High Council responded by sending reinforcements. 50 more warships. Another 100,000 soldiers. The message was clear: victory through overwhelming force. Rellen prepared for the assault on Earth. The human homeworld was beautiful in a savage way. Blue oceans, green continents swirling white clouds. It looked peaceful from orbit. It was anything but. The first landing attempts were disasters. Human anti-orbital weapons had improved dramatically since Mars. Ships that should have landed safely were torn apart before reaching the atmosphere. Relin lost 18 troop carriers in the first wave alone. The humans had also begun psychological warfare. Veilith communication frequencies started receiving transmissions. Not threats, not demands for surrender, just questions. Does your family know where you are? How many of your friends have died this week? What are you fighting for? Relin ordered his communications officers to block the transmissions, but they kept finding new frequencies. The messages came at all hours. Some were in the Veilith language, perfectly translated. Others were just images. Veilith soldiers who had been killed, their bodies treated with respect and arranged carefully. They were not mocking us, Relin explained. That was the terrible part. They were showing us they could reach us anywhere. They were showing us they understood us. And they were asking us why we kept coming. Morale began to crack. Soldiers who had never questioned orders started asking questions. Junior officers whispered that perhaps the humans were not Category 3 after all. Some units refused to advance. The High Council responded by executing deserters. It did not help. I remember standing on my bridge 3 months into the campaign, Relin said. I had lost 40% of my fleet. The humans had gone from scattered resistance to coordinated counterattacks. Their ships were crude, held together with salvage and desperation, but they were effective. He paused, and I realized something that changed everything. We were not fighting a war of conquest anymore. We were fighting for survival, and we were losing. The recording device hummed on. The representatives had stopped taking notes. One of the representatives raised a tentacle. The creature was from a water world, its body translucent and flowing. Commander Voss, it said, you described the humans as adaptive. We have encountered adaptive species before. What made humans different? Relin considered the question for a long moment. Other species adapt to survive, he said finally. Humans adapt to win. There's a difference, a terrible difference. He continued his testimony. 8 months into the campaign, the Veilith had established orbital control over Earth. Their ships blockaded the planet. Their weapons pointed down at human cities. The High Council decided to force surrender through bombardment. We believed that if we destroyed enough of their cities, they would break, Relin said. Every other species had broken under orbital bombardment. The calculations were simple. Destroy 30% of their population centers, and they would surrender. The bombardment began at dawn over the human continent they called Europe. 3 cities burned in the first hour. Millions of humans died. The Veilith waited for the surrender signal. It never came. Instead, something else happened. Something that haunted Relin to this day. A transmission broke through all frequencies. A human woman stood in the ruins of a burning city. Behind her, buildings collapsed. Smoke filled the air. She held a small child in one arm. Her face was covered in ash and blood. But her voice was steady. Completely steady. My name is not important, she said. I am speaking for every human being on this planet. You have burned our cities. You have killed our children. You believe this will make us surrender. She smiled. It was not a happy smile. You are wrong. Every city you burn adds fuel to our fire. Every death you cause creates 10,000 new soldiers. We were divided before you came. You have united us. We were uncertain. You have given us purpose. She looked directly at the camera. We will never surrender. We will never stop. And when we are done with you, we will make sure no one else ever does this again. To anyone, anywhere, ever. The transmission ended. I watched that broadcast on my bridge, Relin said. My officers watched with me. Nobody spoke for a long time. The bombardment continued for 2 more weeks. The humans lost 12 major cities. Tens of millions died. And the human response was not surrender. It was attack. Human ships began suicide runs against Veilith carriers. Pilots would aim their vessels directly at critical systems and accelerate. No Yixchen, no attempt at survival. Just impact. We could not understand it, Relin said. Our soldiers value their lives. Our pilots would never throw themselves away, so readily. But humans, he trailed off. Humans have a concept they call sacrifice. They believe dying for their people is honorable. They believe it gives their death meaning. And once they believe something, they act on it without hesitation. The Valeth began losing capital ships, not to superior firepower, to humans who turned themselves into weapons. Ground assaults became even more costly. Valeth soldiers landed in human cities expecting resistance. They found empty streets instead. The humans had evacuated civilians entirely, leaving only soldiers who had chosen to stay and fight to the death. They called them rearguards, Relin explained. Soldiers who knew they would not survive. They volunteered anyway. They wrote letters to their families before the battle. They made peace with their gods. And then they fought until we killed every single one. One engagement stayed with Relin forever. A Valeth battalion landed in a human city to secure a communication facility. The humans had left 100 soldiers to defend it. The battalion numbered 3,000. The battle lasted 9 days. When it ended, the Valeth had lost 800 soldiers. All 100 humans were dead. The communication facility was destroyed. The humans had rigged it to explode when they ran out of ammunition. 800 soldiers, Relin said, against 100 defenders. And the humans considered that a victory because we did not get what we came for. The High Council began debating withdrawal for the first time. The campaign had been projected to cost 50,000 soldiers at most. They had lost 400,000. Their fleet had been reduced by 60%. And the humans were not weakening. They were getting stronger. Human manufacturing had shifted entirely to war production. Factories that once made vehicles now produced weapons. Scientists who once studied medicine now designed explosives. Artists and teachers and farmers had become soldiers. The entire species transformed, Relin said. In 8 months, they went from a divided, chaotic civilization to a single entity focused entirely on our destruction. No other species had ever done that. No other species had the will. The worst news came from Valeth intelligence. Human ships had been spotted outside the Sol system, not retreating, advancing. They were coming for the Valeth homeworld. I remember the moment I heard that report, Relin said quietly. I remember thinking, we did not invade them. We woke them up, and now they are awake forever. The representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Relin stood up from his chair and walked to the window. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant. He had once loved those stars. Now, they reminded him of how far he was from everything he had lost. The war changed in the 10th month, he said without turning around. Before that, we were invaders. After that, we were prey. He returned to his seat. The human counteroffensive began without warning. Valeth border worlds received distress signals from supply stations. Human strike teams had appeared from nowhere, destroyed critical infrastructure, and vanished before reinforcements arrived. They did not attack with overwhelming force, Relin explained. That was not their way. They attacked with precision. They hit what we needed and ignored everything else. Our supply lines collapsed within weeks. The High Council pulled forces from Earth to defend the border. This was exactly what the humans wanted. With fewer ships in orbit, Earth's remaining defenders launched their own attacks. Human ground forces recaptured 3 major cities in a single month. Relin was reassigned to defend a Valeth colony world called Tishura. It was a farming planet, home to 8 million Valeth civilians. The High Council believed the humans would not target civilians. They were wrong. The humans came to Tishura with 12 ships, Relin said. 12. I had 40 defending the planet. I should have destroyed them easily. The human ships did not engage directly. Instead, they spread out and began transmitting, not to Valeth military frequencies, to civilian ones. People of Tishura, the transmission said, we are not here to harm you. We are here for your military forces. If you evacuate the military installations, we will leave your cities untouched. You have 6 hours. Relin ordered the civilians to ignore the transmission. He deployed his fleet to intercept the human ships. He was confident. The battle lasted 4 hours. The human ships used tactics Relin had never seen. They worked together as if sharing one mind, anticipating each other's movements without communication. They exploited every weakness in Valeth formation doctrine. They targeted critical systems with surgical precision. When the battle ended, Relin had lost 31 ships. The humans had lost 2. The ground assault came next. Human soldiers descended onto Shura's military bases. Relin watched from his damaged flagship as they moved through his defenses. They were not faster than Valeth soldiers. They were not stronger, but they were utterly relentless. One engagement showed Relin what he was truly facing. A human soldier had been surrounded by a Valeth squad. She was wounded in 3 places. Her weapon was nearly empty. Any rational creature would have surrendered. She did not surrender. Instead, she activated her communication device and reported her position. Then she drew the Valeth soldiers deeper into the building complex, fighting a retreat that cost Valeth lives every step of the way. When her ammunition ran out, she used her combat knife. When her knife broke, she used her hands. She killed 4 more soldiers before they brought her down. But that was not the point. While she fought, human reinforcements had circled behind the Valeth position. The squad that killed her was destroyed 30 seconds later. She had been bait. She had known it, and she had done it anyway. I watched the recording afterward, Relin said. Her face in those final moments. She was not afraid. She was not angry. She was satisfied. She had done her job. She had protected her people. He shook his head slowly. How do you fight that? How do you defeat an enemy who considers death an acceptable prize for victory? Tashura fell within a week. The humans kept their word about civilians. Not a single non-military Valeth was harmed. The humans even provided medical supplies to wounded civilians caught in the crossfire. That confused us more than anything, Relin admitted. We had bombarded their cities. We had killed their children. And they showed mercy to our people. Why? The answer came from a captured human officer. During interrogation, a Valeth questioner demanded to know why humans did not simply exterminate Valeth civilians in revenge. The human looked at the questioner with something like pity. Because we remember what you did, she said, and we refuse to become you. The war spread beyond Ashura. Human ships appeared in system after system. But they were not alone. The species the Valeth had conquered over 3,000 years were watching. They saw humans defeat Valeth fleets. They saw humans show mercy where the Valeth had shown none. And they began to rise. Rebellions erupted across Valeth space. Slave worlds broke their chains. Subject species seized weapons from their oppressors. The dominion that had stood for 3,000 years began to crack. The humans did not just fight us, Relin said. They reminded every species we had conquered that resistance was possible. They gave the galaxy hope. And hope is more dangerous than any weapon. The High Council issued the final order. All remaining Valeth forces would consolidate at the homeworld for a last stand. Relin obeyed. He had nowhere else to go. A representative from a silicon-based species leaned forward. Its crystalline body caught the light as it spoke. Commander Voss, you mentioned the humans sparked rebellions among your subject species. Did they coordinate with these rebellions? Relin let out a bitter sound. Coordinate? They did more than coordinate. They armed them, trained them, gave them our own weapons that they had captured and improved. The humans understood something we never did. He paused. They understood that empires built on fear are always one defeat away from collapse. We had conquered through terror for 3,000 years. The humans showed the galaxy that we could bleed, and that was enough. The final phase of the war began as Valeth forces retreated to the homeworld. Relin's fleet was a shadow of its former strength. He had left Tashura with 11 ships. By the time he reached the homeworld, he had 7. Human raiders had picked off the rest during the long journey home. The homeworld's defenses were still formidable. 200 warships, orbital platforms bristling with weapons, ground forces numbering in the millions. The High Council believed that even if the humans reached the homeworld, they would break against its defenses. Relin no longer believed anything the High Council said. The humans arrived 3 weeks later. Their fleet was smaller than the Valeth Defense Force. Perhaps 150 ships. Many were damaged. Some were held together with salvage from fallen Valeth vessels. We expected them to attack immediately, Relin said. That is what we would have done. Strike while your enemy prepares. Catch them off guard. The humans did not attack. Instead, they formed a defensive perimeter around the system and waited. Days passed, then weeks. The Valith High Council demanded explanations. Why were the humans not attacking? What were they waiting for? The answer arrived in the form of more ships. They came from every direction. Species the Valith had oppressed for centuries. The Morvith, whose world had been strip-mined for resources. The Calyx, whose people had served as slave labor. The Dinari, whose culture had been erased and replaced with Valith customs. They came in ships old and new, large and small. Some were military vessels. Others were civilian transports armed with whatever weapons their crews could find. They came in their hundreds, then their thousands. The humans had not just defeated us, Relin said quietly. They had built an alliance. Every wrong we had committed over 3,000 years had come back to haunt us. Every species we had crushed now stood beside humanity, demanding justice. The combined fleet outnumbered the Valith defenders 5-1. The High Council offered surrender. The humans responded with their terms. Complete disarmament of all Valith military forces. Reparations to every conquered species. War crimes trials for High Council members and military commanders. Independence for all subject worlds. The Council refused. Better to die fighting, they said, than to accept such humiliation. Relin understood their reasoning. He even agreed with it at first. The Valith were warriors. They did not kneel. Then the humans did something unexpected. They broadcast a message to every Valith civilian on the homeworld. Not threats, not demands, just information. They told the Valith people what their government had done. They showed recordings of atrocities. They listed the dead from 100 conquered worlds. They explained calmly and clearly why this war had happened and who had started it. Your leaders told you this was self-defense, the human speaker said. They lied. We did not threaten you. We did not attack you. Your leaders saw a peaceful species and decided to enslave them. This is the result. The broadcast ended with a simple statement. We do not want to destroy your world. We do not want to kill your people. But we will do what we must to end this war. The choice is yours. Civil unrest spread across the Valith homeworld. Citizens demanded answers from the High Council. Soldiers questioned their orders. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Valith people doubted their leaders. The High Council responded with force. They deployed security units to suppress protests. They arrested dissidents. They declared martial law. It did not work. The humans had already won, Relin said. Not through military force, through truth. They had exposed what we were. And our own people could not look away. The final battle was almost anticlimactic. Valith ships began surrendering before the Allied fleet even engaged. Whole squadrons powered down their weapons and transmitted their surrender. Ground forces refused to fight. Orbital platforms went silent. The High Council fled to a bunker deep beneath the capital city. They believed they could hold out indefinitely. They were wrong. Human ground forces landed 3 days later. They moved through the city without harming civilians. They surrounded the bunker, and they waited. They could have blown the bunker open, Relin said. They had the weapons. They had the justification. After what we did to their cities, no one would have blamed them. He met the eyes of the representatives. Instead, they negotiated. They talked the council out of that bunker over 6 days of patient conversation. They treated war criminals with more dignity than we had shown unarmed civilians. His voice cracked. Why? Why did they not simply destroy us? The answer had haunted him ever since. Relin reached into his coat and pulled out a small object. It was a medical badge, human design, worn and faded. This belonged to the soldier who captured me, he said. She could have killed me. I was an enemy commander. I had ordered attacks that killed thousands of her people. She had every right. He turned the badge over in his hands. Instead, she treated my wounds. She gave me water. She looked at me like I was a person, not a monster. And when I asked her why, she said something I will never forget. The representatives waited in silence. She said, "Because you are hurt, and I can help. That is enough." Relin set the badge on the table. That is the brutal truth about humans. That is why you cannot defeat them. It is not their weapons. It is not their tactics. It is not even their refusal to surrender. It is this. He tapped the badge. They hold themselves to standards even when their enemies do not. They choose mercy when they could choose revenge. They refuse to become the monsters they fight against. And that makes them something far more dangerous than any warrior species. He leaned forward. It makes them righteous. The war ended 14 months after it began. The Valith Dominion, which had ruled for 3,000 years, was dismantled in less than 2. The High Council faced trial for war crimes. Most were convicted. Some were executed. Relin himself had been captured during the final assault on the homeworld. He expected imprisonment or death. Instead, he was offered a choice. The humans asked if I would testify, he said. They wanted a record of what happened from the Valith perspective. They wanted the galaxy to understand how we thought, why we made the decisions we made, what led us down this path. He gestured around the hearing chamber. That is why I am here today. Not as a prisoner, as a witness. The humans let me go on the condition that I would tell the truth to anyone who asked, including you. One of the representatives, a tall creature with feathered wings, spoke up. Commander Voss, you have told us how the humans fought. You have told us how they won. But you have not told us whether they can be defeated. Surely there must be some weakness. Relin was silent for a long moment. I have thought about that question every day since my capture, he said. I have analyzed every battle, every tactic, every decision, and I have found no weakness. The representatives murmured among themselves. But, Relin continued, I have found something else. A pattern. A truth about humans that you need to understand before you make any decisions about war. He stood up. Humans do not start wars of conquest. In their entire history, they have never once attacked a species that had not threatened them first. But when they are attacked, they do not stop until the threat is eliminated. Not contained, not managed, eliminated. He looked at each representative in turn. We thought we were conquering a primitive species. We woke up a power that will never go back to sleep. Humans now patrol the borders of their space with fleets that would have terrified us at the height of our power. They have alliances with every species we ever oppressed. They have weapons we cannot comprehend. His voice dropped, and they remember. They remember every atrocity. They remember every city we burned. They remember every child we killed. They will remember for 1,000 years. And if anyone ever gives them a reason to go to war again. He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. I am the last survivor of the Valith 7th Fleet, Relin said. 400 warships, 3 million soldiers. The finest military force our species ever produced. I am all that remains. He picked up a medical badge and held it one final time. The humans let me live because they wanted me to deliver a message. Not a threat, not a warning, just a simple truth. He looked at the 12 representatives. Humans do not want war. They do not seek conquest. They do not dream of empire. But if you force them to fight, they will destroy everything you have ever built. They will pull your dominion apart stone by stone. And when it is over, they will help your victims rebuild. He set the badge down with a soft click. You came here asking if you can defeat humanity. I'm telling you that you cannot. Not because they are stronger. Not because they are smarter. Because they are better than we were. Because they have something we never had. He paused. Humanity fights to protect. We fought to conquer. That is the difference. And that difference will destroy anyone who makes the same mistake we did. Relin walked toward the exit. At the door, he stopped and looked back one final time. If you are wise, you will go home and tell your governments to seek peace with humanity. Trade with them. Learn from them. Befriend them if you can. Because the alternative is becoming another name on the list of species that thought they could win a war against humans. He opened the door. I was a fleet commander. I had everything. Now I have only this testimony and the mercy of my enemies. Learn from my example. He stepped through the door and was gone. The 12 representatives sat in silence for a very long time.